Here we go. You have enough? Really, it's good.
Call the meeting to order. Roll call. Hayden.
Here.
Vernon.
Here.
Sherry.
Here.
Ben.
Here,
And show Ty being absent, please. Will everybody please stand and help me with the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment. Public comment will be allowed at the mayor's discretion. This is exclusive of items requiring a public hearing. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. As a reminder to the public and city council members alike, the city council staff will not engage in a dialogue or debate with any speaker pertaining to any comments made. Members of the public wishing to speak must keep their comments germane or relevant to the specific agenda item before the council. Please wait to be recognized by the mayor. Remember to state your name and address for the record. If you're online and would like to participate, please type your name in the chat room and wait to be recognized before unmuting and speaking. Consent agenda. I need a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Have a motion to her second. Second. Discussion.
No.
Not seeing any. Take a vote. Vernon. Aye. Sherry.
Aye.
Hayden.
Aye.
Ben.
aye,
Yes, 4-0. The gentleman here for item number 2 is not here yet. He's coming from Wichita. So we're going to move on to the city administrator and staff reports. I'm going to open it up with Captain Oberlinger.
So the chief decided to take the time to go camping this week.
Oh, nice.
Not a good week to go camping.
And because of my CDO, which is OCD in alphabetical order, I did not get these over to Catherine in time to get any
Thank you.
packet. It's a summary of the.
And Captain, I think
Yeah.
we're gonna take up those two specific items and during the work session,
Oh.
which will be right after this regular meeting. So now would be an opportunity for you to provide any updates or reviews about the, the happenings in the department, in the chief's absence, or, the other exciting news like year.
Roughly everything that's been home. We have an applicant that we're gonna meet with next week, with the chief is back and feeling all rested to do vacation. And he's already failed.
Oh, great.
Other than that, it's one of the part of your town 3 cars. that we're not pick up.
Good deal. Thanks, Captain. Gene.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Gene Miracle Municipal Service. Been working on multiple PSA contracts with the city attorney. The VFW flashing beacon project's planned to start tomorrow, which will be right here by Maple and 155th. Tomahawk Park parking lot is scheduled for the week of August 7th. Awesome. So working with staff on budget items and with your approval, when we opened the brush dump from the storm 2 Saturdays, we had it open from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and had over 40 trailers show up.
Wow.
And we had 8 calls from elderly residents that was unable. So staff did go out and pick up the brush curbside from those.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Addie?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out one thing on the consent agenda with our sales tax distribution for the month of June of 2023. Because where July 4th fell on their distribution schedule, the Kansas Department of Revenue was actually closed for a few days. And so you can see on the consent agenda that the sales tax distribution is showing down, but that's only because it was only a partial month. We did receive the distribution for July, and that course corrected the following month. out. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Second, we are in full force with the trash transition. Just as a reminder, today was Waste Management's last service day. Please keep your waste management carts at the curb until they collect them. Next week, we will start with Brothers Disposal. They will service our community Monday through Thursday. We have an interactive map that shows the different communities and their service day of the week. I would like to just say thank you to Stephanie Curl, Shauna Hernandez, Jenna Donnelly, Christy Olson, and Kathy Wren. I think our team has done a fantastic job getting this information out. This transition is tough, and we certainly understand that, and we stand ready to help the community. On the August 9th meeting, we are asking for your consideration to have a meeting of the Land Bank Board of Trustees. In order for us to do that, we do have to properly notice that. So if you are okay with it, we would ask your permission to notice that with your electronic signature for those of you who are present this evening. So I just ask if that would be okay with everyone.
That's a regular meeting to follow.
That if we would do a regular meeting, work session, and then the meeting of the Land Bank Board of Trustees following.
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
we are required to notice that separately.
I'm
Okay.
good.
Hayden, Mayor,
I'm good.
Yes.
Yes.
Ben,
Yes, thank you.
thank you so much. Just as a reminder, the Mayor's Golf Tournament is on September 20th. Registration to play in the golf tournament will open on August 1st. We do expect to sell out. So if you are interested in playing in the tournament, please reserve your spot early. The Mayor's Shred event for confidential information and documents for Besa residents will be on August 26th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at City Hall. Thank you to the mayor for funding that event for city residents. We will have city staff on site to verify residency before folks are able to participate in that event.
I'm sorry, May, what's the time on that?
9 a.m. to 12 p.m.
9 to 12, okay.
Yes, sir. We also did include that in the Besa quarterly newsletter, and those should be hitting mailboxes today, tomorrow, and Saturday. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy? You have nothing? Cameron?
The planning department is preparing for the August 8th planning commission meeting, and currently we do have one item on the agenda. So we're busy.
Okay. Maria, you have anything?
Oh, good evening, Mayor and Council. Just two quick updates. As Jean stated, just been helping work on miscellaneous agreements. It's kind of been a busy few weeks, but I think everything is under control and going well. And then staff also had a kind of a follow-up meeting with Encode. It's a company I told you about a few weeks ago, maybe a month now. It's the company that's helping us review and update our code. And they're just kind of giving us periodic updates. They're still transferring everything into their system so that their team can start making comments and giving us something to really work with. And I just wanted to let you know that I hope to have a substantive update for you on where that is around mid to late August.
Thank you. Leslie?
Thank you, Mayor. I do not have a ton to add other than, as you can see, we have a number of projects that are in various phases of construction or pre-construction. We are looking at opportunities to maximize efficiencies through contracts, coordinating all of the various contractors on these projects, as you might imagine, can be quite a task. We were approached by Crossland yesterday, who has expressed interest in looking at the balance of the civic campus park improvement work to see if we might be able to gain some efficiencies by having them perform additional duties that might be within their scope of within services that they could provide for our scope. So we will see what that pricing looks like and see if that might be something appropriate to bring to the council for consideration. We were notified today of an error with KDOT's scheduling. The project representative that is overseeing all of the Besa projects, I think, is managing, I think his email said in excess of 180 projects statewide. And so he sent us a calendar that apparently was for a different process. And so it looks like our project letting may occur in January instead of November. That's not a tremendous impact to our project one way or another. But, you know, any impact to what we've anticipated to be the schedule is an impact. So we were just notified of this today. We're still very much in the early stages of trying to figure out if we can keep on a November letting schedule. That's what we've been working towards. That's what our engineering firm has been working towards, and that's what we thought we were doing. So we would very much like to honor that calendar if there's any way possible to keep that moving as we thought. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I don't think I have anything else to share at this time.
What is the next step? I know that we've got all the property down and everything. What is, I know they've been marking utilities. What is the next step on 155th Street?
So the next step is utility coordination or utility relocation is supposed to be finalized before the end of this year. Really, we're targeting end of the fall, so October, November timeframe. And so far, it looks like all utilities will meet those timeframes. We have a pre-construction meeting with Atmos. They're kind of our last major utility that needs to get in and to do relocations. They have been excellent to coordinate with, but Consolidated had the most work to do. So we let Consolidated kind of get in there and go first. Consolidated is on schedule. That's fantastic. Next step after those utility relocations is project letting. This project is let by KDOT. And once they have let the project and they select a contractor, they'll agree to a contract schedule and timeline. That'll most likely be part of the KDOT bidding process. And then construction will commence. So we're hopeful to be under construction at the beginning of 2024. And this project is set to be concluded by the end of 2024. And that same timeline is for both the 155th Street project as well as the Metro Green Trail project. Our goal has always been to have those projects let at the same time. It's possible that there could be two separate contractors awarded to actually perform construction. Again, the city doesn't control that process, but we were hopeful that by having them let at the same time, again, maybe we could maximize some efficiencies by having potentially one contractor selected for both.
Thank you. I appreciate the update. Okay, moving on to city council members reports.
I have none.
Sherry?
I don't have anything to announce from the last time, but I do have a quick question. Maybe Maddie. So you mentioned the quarterlies going out, should be out today, or by chance, is there any information in there on the waste management and the brothers, just for the folks that don't have social media access?
Yes, there is. There's an article about the process, the key dates, basically a summary of what we posted on social media is encapsulated in an article in the Baser Quarterly.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Maddie.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey,
Yeah, not a lot. Just wanted to note it's County Fair Week, so a lot going on out there. If people have a chance to swing by.
Ben, do you have anything?
No updates, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to mayor's report. The only thing I want to talk about is they are moving dirt up at where Taco Bell is, which is nice to see that they're getting ready to do that. And I don't know if anybody's been over to the civic campus and seen where they're building the new city hall, but they are moving fast. That's awesome. So that's all I have.
Speaking of that, I'm sorry if I may take the mic back. for
Sure.
one- Just a brief second. Maddie this week actually ordered a time lapse camera. So we're gonna affix a time lapse camera at the construction site so that we can get daily record of the construction progress, not only for this project, but really all of our projects. We're also exploring the potential for some drone footage at some of the critical kind of construction phases, just because, again, it's not often that a community builds a new city hall. It's not often that a community builds the number of projects that we have underway, and certainly not at the same time. And so we thought this would just really be an awesome opportunity to record really these groundbreaking moments in our community.
Is there a way that we can update our website? I know that we update the website, but I'm talking about the actual presentation of Welcome to Baser thing like that. When does that come up again? Do you know, Maddie?
It's 2024.
2024, we're scheduled to reshoot that. 2024.
Okay,
3 years.
okay. right,
Thank you, Kathy.
So we're gonna move back to item number 2, resolution number 2023-21. A resolution authorizing the offering for sale of general obligation bonds, series 2023-A of the city of Baker, Kansas.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight with us, we have Mitch Walter from Gilmore and Bell, our bond counsel. Also online, we have Ben Hart from Baker Tilly, our financial advisor. This resolution would authorize the offering of sale of general obligation bonds for 3 major projects. First, Civic Campus, second, Metro Green Trail, and then third, the lift station that at the 2302 lift station project. That was a bond issuance that we've been scheduling in the previous budget cycle and also this budget cycle. We discussed this at the governing body retreat and then subsequent budget presentations. Tonight we have in person, Mitch Walter from Gilmore and Bell. I don't know if Mitch, you want to add any additional details, if you want to step up to the microphone, that would be great. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have after Mitch is done with his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maddie. I don't have any prepared remarks. I think the background is covered pretty well. This is in the terms of a bond sale. This is step 1 of the financing calendar, where basically the city green lights that, yes, we do want to finance the projects with general obligation bonds, and we're authorizing bond counsel, the city's financial advisor, Baker Tilly, Mr. Hart, and city staff to go out and prepare the necessary offering documents and then take all actions necessary to prepare the bonds for sale. Based on the schedule, the bond sale would be on August 23rd. That's the date that the city would actually take bids for the bonds and presumably award the sale of the bonds to the low bidder. And then closing of the bond issue, and when the city actually received the proceeds, would take place approximately 3 weeks after the sale date. And so this is what we sometimes call the sale resolution or the set sale resolution. And we just want to make sure that all questions are answered regarding the projects that are financed, any questions about the bonds, any questions about the process. And so we know that we are clear to move forward and actually deliver the bonds for sale.
We'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has, Mayor.
Any questions?
No, like you said, we've discussed this a lot. It's the next step. It's exciting.
Okay. So I think we're good. I'll
You're
call-
ready to take a motion?
Take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve resolution 2023-21, authorizing the offering for sale of general obligation bonds, series 2023A of the city of Baker.
Have a motion to our second.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Take a vote. Ben,
Aye.
Sherry,
Aye.
Hayden.
Aye.
Vernon.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Is there a need for an executive session?
There is not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I need a motion to adjourn the regular meeting.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Take a vote on it. Vernon.
Aye.
Ben,
Aye.
Sherry.
Aye.
Hayden.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. We'll go into the work session. Item number 1, Arch Design Standards, Dollar Tree.
Thank you, Mayor. Leslie Riverola, City Administrator. We do have on Zoom this evening representatives from the Dollar Tree, which is the applicant for the request for deviations from your architectural design standards. I will just note, I am very much to steal Maddie's words, the poor man's crystal today in presenting the architectural design guideline deviation request. As the council is aware, the city has received an application for commercial development from Dollar Tree. They wish to locate within Lot 2 of Block 1 of the Wolf Creek Junction Phase 1. For all intents and purposes, what that means is very near Anna Mary Landauer's former home. So they have acquired property and submitted a plan set to the city, and upon receiving that submittal, staff very early recognized that it did not meet the architectural design standards that have been adopted by the community. As by the governing body, as we've discussed on a number of occasions for other similar applications, The current architectural design standards that are in place are very stringent. They're very difficult to achieve. We do have projects that have achieved them, but by and large, the majority of commercial projects that have come through application to the city in the last certainly 18 months have had some request for deviation. With that in mind, staff suggested to the applicant that rather than having them go through the expense of preparing a complete plan submittal, as you know, that is very stringent and it is expensive. It requires stormwater reports, traffic study reports, and a full design set of their intention to build. We said it would probably be in their better interest to prepare an application for the city council to consider those deviations up front and to gauge the temperature of the governing body and whether you would have any appetite for making those deviations. To be more specific about what deviations are being sought, give me 1 second just to kind of catch my bearings. The current architectural design guidelines or standards require four-sided design. The applicant is proposing to add a 48-inch wainscot down the east and west facade that will match the wainscot along the front of the building. While this certainly does add architectural appeal, it does not completely conform to your current standards as adopted. So that's one deviation. The second deviation is that the building does not have at least 50% heavy materials such as stone, cast stone, or brick of the total exterior wall area as required in section 4.6.4. The applicant is proposing a building that will include 26%, so about half of that requirement, hard materials on 3 sides of the building. The front of the building and 20-foot turn back wings on the sides of the building are proposed to be hand-laid ephes in a pebble finish above the masonry style wainscot. So in Leslie terms, we're talking basically stucco finish. That's what I would call that. The remainder of the building is proposed to be a high efficiency exterior wall panel that mimics a stucco finish. The next deviation that the Dollar Tree would be seeking is the sides of the building appear to not have proper modulation and articulation as required in section 4.9, which requires facades that exceed 30 feet in length to have at least one change in wall plane, such as projections or recesses, and having a depth of at least 3% of the entire length of the facade, extending over at least 20% of the entire length of the facade. And again, the intent behind that standard is really so that you don't have just one flat wall with no design change. As we continue on, section 4.10 building scale. Building walls should be subdivided and proportioned using features such as windows, entrances, storefronts, arcades, arbors, awnings, trellises, or other similarly scaled architectural details. These features shall cover at least 90% of the building's front wall length and at least 60% of other building wall lengths. We don't quite meet that. 4.11 parapets and cornices. All flat roofs shall have a parapet and a cornice on all facades or walls. This application does not meet those criteria. Section 4.12, pitched roofs and eaves. Pitched roofs shall be gable, hip, or shed configurations with overhanging eaves. There is no indication of overhanging eaves included on this plan set as we see them. And then it goes on to 4.13, gutters, downspouts, and scupper. Exposed downspouts shall only be allowed at interior corners. The applicant is requesting to locate the downspouts on the rear of the building. And then finally, 4.16 glazing. The code requires that any primary facade, in this case, the front of the building and the east of the building, to have a minimum of 50% glazing within the pedestrian line of sight. To fulfill this requirement, the windows would need to be extended along the front facade of the building and incorporated in the design of the east side of the building. And as we've discussed with several different applications, for a multitude of reasons, a number of stores don't desire to have that level of glazing or windows or faux windows in some cases on their facilities, whether it's for inventory purposes or perhaps just a business decision. Well, it certainly is the opinion of staff that this building does not meet the architectural design standards as adopted, and that's our obligation to point that out to the governing body that it does not. Based upon, recent decisions of the governing body for other applications within this corridor, staff would suggest considering approving these deviations if it is the community's desire to have this applicant located in town. After conversations with the applicant, it sounds as though the Dollar Tree has some specific prototypes that they utilize when they're constructing facilities, and within their margin of profit, a certain allowance in which they can make modifications. I will say this is a modified application from what they originally submitted. So I do think that they have worked to try to get into a little better compliance with the architectural design standards, but as it sits today, we're not able to get there. So ultimately, this is a policy decision of the city council. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, but the applicant is on the line and is certainly in a better position to describe their need on their behalf than I am.
Is that?
It's
Steve-
Mr. Rollins.
Mr. Rollins, Mr. Rollins, would you like to say something, sir?
First of all, thank you guys for taking the time to look at our application. Most of the points I put in our application is we're just Dollar Tree wants to be there. We're a preferred developer with them. We bought the property. We will build the building. We will own the building and lease it to them. They basically do internal market studies, and just tell us what rent they can afford. And we just have to figure out a way to build it for that price. We have stretched our budget to make these, even though they look minor, they are substantial changes on trying to satisfy some of your needs and stuff. We want to build it there. We just have to, if it's not economically feasible to us, we'll just have to pass on the market and maybe revisit in a later date and stuff. But I'll be glad to answer any questions or tell you any of our history, anything like that. But we just appreciate all the consideration you guys can give us.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Rollins or Leslie? Vernon? No. Sherry?
I do not.
Aiden?
No, we've talked about this with the last couple, where we've talked about exceptions, and there was, as Leslie noted, a lot of restrictions put in place, and we've been working with folks. I think this is, again, a fairly nice looking building and not completely out of character for that area. I think it's a related type of store that we've heard a lot of questions and concern about. So I think I'm open to some deviations. I think it does have, some changes in roof height, a little bit of depth with the front of the store. I think the east side is less critical to me, where there may be folks parking, but it's not facing the main exterior of 2440.
I agree with you, Hayden. I think it's a nice looking building in myself. So Vernon, do you have anything you want to comment on or anything?
I'm just thinking, we've been going through this, as Hayden has identified, quite frequently. It makes me wonder how our design guidelines, are going to work for other companies that might want to come in that already have, kind of a design schedule. We can always ask them to put some different facades on or different hangings on, but again, that kind of looks like the standard Dollar Trees that I've been seeing throughout the country. So it really comes down to us. Do we want to have Dollar Tree come in, and build their building the way that they build their building, or do we need to really take another real strong hard look at our architectural design?
I agree with you. I think we need to look at that and see if we need to update that whole program, basically. Because I don't know how long ago this was set up, but I think for all the building that's been going on, we've had all kinds of issues. So maybe we need to, even if we have a work session just on that one day or something.
But Mr. Mayor, I do want to point out that doesn't mean we need to be willy-nilly. That doesn't mean we need to just let any and everything occur. But if this is their standard footprint, And other companies that might want to come in might have a kind of standard footprint. We just have to decide if we want that facility in our community or not. Now, as we continue to grow, and as I look at architectural designs from way back in 2012, we've made some modifications, and I think Crystal's doing an outstanding job of identifying things that need to be done. I think companies need to be aware that this community is trying to maintain a certain appearance, and I just kind of concerned that this is coming up with almost every new business that's coming in town. Is it that we are out of step, or is it that we are, or is it that they're, out of step with us?
I completely agree with you, Bernard. Sherry, you have any comment? Would you like to address that? Okay.
Yeah, Leslie, the comment about other recent buildings, right? There's not a complete picture, at least from Google Maps on the new bank building, the financial building that went in. What was their compliance?
100%. So the Wolf Creek Financial Center, I apologize, did I call that the right name? What is the name of it? First State Financial Center. That's that will have the, I think, chiropractor's office and optometrist. They achieved 100% compliance. Taco Bell had a variance request, but it was not an architectural design guideline variance request. It was a variance request for signage, and that actually went through the BZA and was approved. They wanted more signage than what your code currently allows. Miss Henry's UPS store did achieve architectural compliance. The projects that have not included Fat Cats. So there was an architectural deviation granted for that. There was a significant architectural deviation for the Baser Veterinary Clinic, Mr. Chambers project, and then now potentially this project.
Bill, I forgot about you. I'm sorry. Do you have anything you would like to say?
No, I think everybody brought up really good points, and especially Vernon's statement in regards to, just the architectural design. It seems as though these things continue to come up. Maybe it's time that we take a deeper look into what our minimum architectural design really is, instead of continually having these things come back to us. Because just like Vernon said, this looks like any old typical Dollar Tree to me, and if this doesn't meet our architectural design, maybe that's just something that we need to have a little self-reflection on and look at ourselves.
So, Mayor, I would just note, and thank you for that point, Councilmember Sims and Councilmember Fields. The architectural design standards are included in the review that Encode is performing on behalf of the city. That was actually included in the amendment that the city council approved. That amendment included the architectural design guideline or architectural design standards, as well as our ICC codes. And also our standard specifications for other construction documents. So that is on the list. We're blessed, I think, that we have commercial activity that's happening. So some of these applications are really getting in front of our being able to finalize that thorough review. I think we'll all feel more comfortable about adherence to architectural design standards once this governing body has been able to weigh in on what you think is an appropriate level of expectation and finish, and what corridors they should apply to. For example, right now, your architectural design standards apply to pretty large sweeping corridors, including Parallel, which has a lot of industrial building on it. So I think there's certainly an opportunity to right size it, and we want to do it correctly, but I just wanted you to know that that is in process.
And when you talk about right sizing, we need to ensure that Baser is not sending out the message that we're not open for business.
Right.
We are open for business. We just have these guidelines that we need to have people also apply to. We don't have a lot of commercial property. And when someone's coming in, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox right quick, I'm not interested in doing incentives. So we got someone that's coming in, to my knowledge, is not asking for incentives. It's gonna build a building. It's gonna help us with our economic growth, economic development. I think we need to make sure that we have a good balance in there. Again, not going willy-nilly, but we just need to look at how do we make this happen? And it's a good fit for both the company coming in as well as the city itself and the residents themselves. Will the residents benefit from this particular project coming in? And that's always in the back of our mind. Are we going to have economic stimulation from this coming in and have it balanced to where we're not turning people away because they didn't have a parapet?
I think the right sizing is a good comment too, because we did talk about that a little bit last time about the particular area that is it Mr. Chambers project, the granite
Yes.
stone polishing. It's a more industrial feel. It's on the outside edge. It's a little more central, but I think, the overall look, again, there's a little more of that height difference, depth difference. So I think it's a nicer looking building than what needs to be in a different part of that corridor potentially.
I think it looks very attractive. And I won't have to drive to Bonner Springs to shop now.
We would like you to shop here.
Exactly. I would too.
In the back of my mind are stores like Hy-Vee. I look at their layout, would their layout fit our architectural guidelines? I look at stores like Price Chopper, would that fit our architectural guideline? And, other large retailers that have kind of a standardized format. How is that going to fit within our architectural guidelines? And that's what my concern is that, if they're willing to come in and build the building at no cost to the city, and we're saying no because of this.
Nothing. Well, I would just note from a staff perspective, we have very much, I think, appreciated an open dialogue with the developer applicant for this project, recognizing when they provided their first submittal that we were probably worlds apart. I think that they've really put their best foot forward and have made an effort to really modify where they can. And I think we've come up with a good result. And so ultimately, the city council is the decision factor or the deciding factor on whether this would be approved, but staff has recommended approval. And that's, again, happy to answer any additional questions that you have, but we hear the citizens that they would like to see property tax relief. And one of the best ways to do that is to diversify your tax base. And as we saw in last 2 weeks ago, budget presentation, and as you will see in tonight's budget presentation, we don't have a tremendous amount of diversification right now in our tax base. It is heavily residential, which in many ways is attractive and has a lot of great qualities to it. It gives you that hometown feel, your neighbors. The downside to that is property tax burdens are much higher on residential properties because you're not sharing that amongst commercial properties, which pay at a much higher rate.
And you mentioned the staff was recommending, to move forward. I'd have to, based on what I'm seeing, and I'd have to concur with that we need to look at moving forward. But I also have that caveat. We probably need to take a real strong look, and as you mentioned, UNESCO will be looking at that architectural design guidelines. I just don't want to throw the baby out with the water. I don't want to throw those guidelines out without the water. So with the water.
Is that, do you have something to say?
No, I just want to say I'm interested in moving this forward. That's my view.
Yes, now the
Okay.
staff is still. The staff will still make additional recommendations.
So what is in front of you this evening would be whether or not you want to move this to your regular meeting on August the 9th. Which I think what I'm hearing the consensus is yes. So as we have with similar requests, we would prepare a resolution for your consideration. And it would outline the deviations as they were described in the staff report. And like we did with Mr. Chambers' project, we would also attach a copy of what was presented so that everybody is clear in their mind on what deviations we've approved. We've shared with the applicant that this is really the first step. You know, the first question was whether or not the city council would approve the deviations. They still have to go through their site plan submittal and finish their submittal and application process. But again, we didn't want any business to potentially expend dollars on a full plan set if this wasn't something that the city council would ultimately have an appetite to consider. And so you could very much put this on the consent agenda unless you desire to talk about it again more fully in 2 weeks. But I would recommend consent agenda if you're asking.
Ben, you have anything you want to say?
I concur with consent agenda.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Bernie?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins.
Thanks, everybody. We really look forward to working with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to item number 2, discussion and regulation of fireworks.
Mayor, council members.
Yes, sir.
So the department was asked to look into our ordinance covering fireworks and whether any changes need to be made. Currently, the ordinance reads that from June 30th through July 3rd, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., July 4th until 9 a.m. until midnight, and then July 5th, 10 until 10 p.m. is when private persons can set off fireworks, obviously aerials, and then bottle rockets are excluded from that. Also, the sale of fireworks is right in line with that from the 30th until July 5th. The year 2022, we had 8 fireworks complaints. First complaint was on July 1st, the last was on July 8th. And in 2023, we had 7 fireworks complaints. First was on June 30th, and the last was on July 7th. Fire department responded to 2 fires. One was a field fire, one was a structure fire, resulting in minor damage. Trash can caught fire and spread to the house. Surrounding agencies do have, there are several, but Eudora, Lawrence, Leewood, Lenexa, Marion, Mission, Olathe, Overland Park, and Prairie Village. They have no fireworks whatsoever. Bonner Springs, DeSoto, Gardner, Lansing, Roland Park, and Shawnee all allow fireworks during various times. On looking at that, including, as much as I hate to admit it, 60 years of combined empirical data between the chief and I, we find that usually complaints go up if you have a more restrictive fireworks code, because especially when you're in an area where surrounding agencies have fireworks going. We see no reason to have the ordinance change this time.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the chief or captain?
Copy, that was empirical data that you used.
Between the chief and I have both worked in departments over 60 years that have varied from having consider a Wild West feel to absolutely no fireworks at all. I can tell you in some of them that we have worked at that have more restrictive, the officers are quite a bit busier, especially when the surrounding agencies have fireworks, because the fireworks are going off in their backyard. So they call the police, we get there, and then we find out it happened in a jurisdiction that allows fireworks. So it actually ties up more resources.
So how much of a challenge would it be to get data from Bonner Springs, DeSoto, Gardner, Lansing, Roland Park, Shawnee, in terms of the number of violations that occur after July 4th?
After July 4th, I can look into it and I can get back to you on it.
You understand why I'm asking that question?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
No, I appreciate the insight that, it sounds like kind of the point is people are probably going to shoot off some fireworks around the 4th of July in areas such as this. And so having some guidelines around it allows us to constrain and respond appropriately. But if you get it too tight, then you're just constantly chasing those
Yes.
non-fires, hopefully.
Oh, yes.
Sherry?
Thanks for the information. I don't have any problem with the dates of sale of fireworks. I wouldn't mind cutting off maybe 2 days of shooting of fireworks. But again, it looks like we are definitely the most lenient of everything on here.
We are pretty close to that. I think there's one other that came really close to what we did. Like Lansing is fairly close to what we are.
Yeah. And those would be the dates I would consider, because I know we do the 30th through the 5th. And if I had to drop days, I'd drop the 30th and the 5th.
Right.
That's just my view on it. So.
Thank you, sir.
And being in line with what Councilmember Standifer said, I'm all in favor of cutting off that 5th.
I don't necessarily think that would be a problem. I mean, it's called the 4th of July for a reason. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Washington? Carol, would you like to sit there and just talk in the microphone? That way you don't have to get up.
That's wonderful. My name is Carol Washington. I live at 1901 160th Street. And I am here to request a review of the current Basehor fireworks ordinance, especially the days and hours as to when fireworks can be discharged by individuals in the city of Basehor. The current ordinance has been in effect for over 10 years. I don't know exactly how long. Currently in Basehor, fireworks are allowed to be discharged from June 30th to and including July 5th. 6 days, mostly 10 and 12-hour days. There are many who would like the number of days and hours lessened for a variety of reasons. The elderly and infants have difficulty sleeping. There's a great deal of noise from the fireworks, and both during the day and in the evening. Pets react to the 6 days of noise. Many even need tranquilizers. Some get spooked and run off. I compiled information from the neighboring communities, and only one other community has 6 days. They're not the exact same days that we do, but it's the city of Lansing. And here are the other communities. And this list is 10 cities, including Basehor. DeSoto, 4 days. Lansing, 6 days. Edwardsville, 4 days. City of Leavenworth, not permitted. Bonner Springs, July 3rd and 4th, 2 days. Lenexa, not permitted. Overland Park, not permitted. Kansas City, Kansas, 3 days. Olathe, not permitted. Tonganoxie, 5 days. Now, I'm sure, and Basehor, of course, was 6 days, and I'm sure that these cities, especially the large ones, have had people compile all kinds of statistics. But I noticed in the agenda packet that staff, in the person of Kevin Self, the chief of police, had said he was recommending a motion to retain the ordinance as it exists based on minimal complaints. There were no numbers given. I'd be curious as to, maybe some of the numbers were explained already. If I'm correct, this issue would be up for vote at the next meeting. And let's see here. Wait a minute, I have one more sentence. I believe the public was not aware, and many people are hesitant to contact the police department. I don't understand that. Maybe they don't want their neighbors to know that they've called the police for anything, but there's a real hang up there. But I think if the public knew that the reason that they're not going to do anything, or they recommended that they don't do anything in regard to this ordinance, was based on their not stepping up and making a statement, the situation may be different in 2 weeks. because they're going to read this and understand that that's part of their obligation as a citizen to voice their concerns to the people who can make a change, not to your neighbors, your relatives and friends and so on, but truly to the people who can take care of the situation. So I think it's a two-edged thing. It's the number of days and hours. And then also, I think that it's really not the way that patriotism is defined. It's not just having a beer and shooting off fireworks. There are many more things involved, and I think the focus maybe needs to change. And it's been, like I said, over 10 years. So that's my piece.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any more discussion that anybody would like to talk about now or think about it the next 2 weeks? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I appreciate the additional insight and some of the comments after I spoke about reducing it and I see the benefits. We've got our 2 young boys that were kept up a couple of those nights. And the one thing I struggle with on dates is narrowing it, then you may miss weekends. And so if people are going to be shooting them off on a Friday or Saturday night, you don't have an option on either side of the 4th. Next year, the 4th falls on a Thursday. And so the 1st through the 4th is a Monday through Thursday. And I just can't foresee, to your point about receiving complaints, that people won't be shooting them off on Friday the 5th. So I may be dropping the 30th because that's getting pretty far before, but depending on the calendar, you may miss some days and that. So I think it is probably worth some additional discussion, but that's one thing. I like the idea of dropping a day or two on either side, but if you miss weekends, we may have a lot of additional complaints.
There are 3.6 million veterans out there. And those veterans sometimes have problems. They can control, or they know that there's going to be a fire event or a bang event or fireworks for a certain amount of time. And then after that day is cut off, then you don't know what kind of reaction those veterans are going to have. And I'm not trying to just talk for vets. I think back to my time in Air Defense Artillery, we knew that at certain times it was going to stop. And if we had soldiers that were having challenges, we would monitor those soldiers for that period of time. But then anything after that, we don't know what it's going to trigger. I grew up in a community where it was sometimes difficult to tell if it is a firecracker event versus, a weapon. If we cut that fifth off, celebrate. Go ahead and celebrate. I'm probably one of the biggest patriots that we got. Celebrate. But on the 5th, cut it off. After the 4th, cut it off. Get back to some normality.
Yeah, and honestly, that's where I was coming into today. But the point about complaints, if you think people are still going to shoot them off, then you lose that expectation potentially. But if it's messaged right and we have the ability to respond and you have one example here and you nip it in the bud, then maybe that's the right approach.
As Ms. Washington has said, and the question that I asked to the captain, what data do we have that shows just how often, we get law enforcement involved with an event that happens on the 5th?
Yeah.
I do think that the public announcements that the city did helped this year from my other years of living here. So I do think that posting the days and the times did make a difference from what I experienced myself. So that's definitely a good thing. And, we can definitely continue with that to let the public know. But then again, you heard my comment about the 30th and the 5th, and I'm just open. I'm not super strong either way, but it's just a thought. Just because I see most other cities either are a no or they have
Definitely
2 or
outlier.
3 days. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna switch hats now. I'm a retired law enforcement officer. And I know that people are gonna violate the law whenever they want to do it because that's what they want to do. If we hold fast to the fourth, those that want to take the chance or whatever it is, and we know people will do that, they have to just deal with whatever comes their way.
Agreed. And that's, yeah, the messaging I think is key wherever it lands is make sure we have those dates and we stick to it.
So how do you guys want to move this on forward? Do you want to move it forward like it is? Do you want to try to change a day, cut off a day? How do we move it on to the next meeting?
I think I'm pretty clear. I hope that I was pretty clear with saying cut off the fifth.
Sherry?
I mean, yeah, the fifth, definitely. I mean, the holiday's over at that point and most people have had the fourth off. But if we need further discussion with the other two council members in attendance, where we've got 5 people here to actually discuss it, that, you know.
Well, we can discuss that in 2 weeks at that meeting, if they're both here at that time too. So if that's the way you guys want to move it forward, we can do that and have a open discussion.
Yeah, so any other data points? So Captain, I think it might be helpful if we had the Tonganoxie and just clarify Leavenworth County has no restrictions, right? Okay. Perfect. I think that'd be good. Just as another neighboring town, I think you've got a lot of them up there, but what Tonganoxie's components are would be helpful.
They don't have.
Okay. Okay.
Mayor, I think what I'm hearing is a request to prepare an ordinance to adjust the dates that fireworks would be allowed to be discharged within the city limits to narrow the dates. Presently, I'm hearing June 30th through July the 4th, but I've also heard perhaps some interest in shaving that down to July 1st through July 4th. So I think based upon the direction of the city council, if there is a majority or a consensus of this council that you'd like to see an ordinance that contemplates July 1st through July 4th for fireworks discharge, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll prepare an ordinance that is June 30th to July 4th. And then not affecting the dates of sale. So this is just for when fireworks would be permitted to be discharged within the city limits, not when those that are hosting or having fireworks stands when they can sell their fireworks. Those dates are not impacted by this change.
Right.
Did I
That's
hear that correctly?
Hey, Vernon,
Does Ben have any comments? Is he still on?
Ben's not on anymore, is he?
I'll be
No.
nice.
I think if we shave off a day on either side, that works for me. It sounds like that's where you're headed and gives you less days of stress for animals and children and veterans and whoever else may have concerns.
I'm fine going July 1 through 4.
So we'll prepare the ordinance as July 1st through July 4th of each year. The council can always direct staff to amend that ordinance prior to publication when you consider taking a vote. So we would, if for some reason you were to adjust that at the meeting, we would help you through the language of the motion to direct staff to adjust the ordinance and then print it as directed by your motion. So that's how we will prepare it. And that would be on your agenda for August the 9th. So as of today, it's July 1st through the 4th.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good. All right, moving on. Item number 3, discussion municipal code section 22, article 5, weeds and grass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you.
Another thing that we were asked to look at was the basic code for grass and abatement. We looked at what the state statute had to say about it on both the noxious weed law and the abatement statute, and found that our statute falls right in line pretty much with what the Kansas state statute reads. The only place where we get maybe a little bit more restrictive is obviously the statute does not put a limit on what the height of the grass is, because it's covering all of Kansas. And we have a limit of 12 inches. Again, we fell right along lines with some of the neighboring agencies, some of the agencies we looked at, Bonner Springs with 12 inches, Lansing with 10 inches, Leavenworth with 12 inches, Shawnee 10 inches, Tonganoxie has 8 inches. Wyandotte County has both a fine mowing and a general brush hogging. So one is 8 inches and one is 12, depending on what the property is. As far as ours, if the property is over 3 acres and it's not part of a included within a final plat of record with the county recorder of deeds, then they don't have any. It's only if they are in a plat, if they're under 3 acres and within the plat, that they have that restriction of the tax. Otherwise, it could be considered agricultural, for lack of a better word. So that the ordinance does not apply to them. There were several questions that were posed. One was a comparison of surrounding jurisdictions policies related to grassweed violations against Baser. As I said previously, we fall right in line pretty much with the surrounding agencies. An overview of the city's process in addressing weed and grass violations, whether they are reactive or proactive. And what I would say is we were both proactive. Our ACO code enforcement officer does drive around, see the violation, actually, but we're also driving off the complaints come in through the city website or through the email. What properties are subject to the city's municipal code? Whether there are any exemptions to property used agriculturally. And again, I think that was answered about being included within the final plat in less than 3 acres. We did, Chief called and spoke with Chris LaVoff, planning and zoning director. We told him we follow the city's zoning for land use because apparently I guess there are some properties where Leavenworth County has it zoned one way, Baser has it zoned another way. So when it comes to the ordinance, we follow the city zoning, not the Leavenworth County zone. Total number of weed grass cases. We look back from 2021 to 2022. I'll start with 2022. ACO CSO Webb was hired December of 21. Log of cases began May of 22. There were 53 cases logged during that time. In 2023, ACO CSO position moved from part-time to full-time because of call load. As of the year to date of 6/30, there were 51 cases logged. The reason why I skipped over 2021 is we did not necessarily have an official codes officer at the time. The ATO who was part-time kind of caught as it came in complaints, so they weren't necessarily logged at that time, and that's why we're keeping the log now on what it is. Neighboring cities regulating fine mowing versus brush mowing. The only one was Wyandotte County. I believe it was Wyandotte County, not Kansas City, Kansas, but they're unified government. And is our city ordinance same or more restrictive? So the city of Baser ordinance is in line with Kansas state statute. The ordinance is no more restrictive other than the city of Baser imposing a maximum height on the grass. What I would say is 12 inches based on the mix of residential versus rural. 12 inches is probably a pretty good because it does not include a homeowners association from restricting a lower cut, but that would not be handled by police or the CSO. So we are not suggesting any changes to the ordinance at this time.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So between Leavenworth Road and the north boundary of the city, there's some steep ditches. Is that the landowner's responsibility to remove those? The city, I assume, does not go out and remove those weeds.
It's homeowners.
This, you didn't know this is the codes enforcement officer, Ashley Webb.
I do,
So I brought
yes.
her along as my security blanket. If you had any questions that I couldn't answer.
Yeah. Because I've noticed, you know, I'm on 155th Street a lot, and between 2440 and Leavenworth Road, overall, it's very good. But once you get past Leavenworth Road and you're going north, it's a lot more hit and miss with the ditches. And there's some now that You know, I've got Johnson grass that's probably above my waist. So, you know, I don't know. That's why I wanted to clarify, does the city go and mow that, or is the landowner should have probably mowed that, I would assume 60 days ago.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that if it is over the 3 acres and not a final plat, so it doesn't fall within those restrictions, the landowners are still required to keep the right of way clear so that line of sight is available.
Right. Okay. And then I do appreciate that when that, you know, when comments have been made or things that there has been activity to get that resolved. But like I said, I do know there are some ditches right now between the city limits and Leavenworth Road that have quite a bit of, it's not even grass, it's weeds and trees and shrubs and everything that's from the ditch clear up to the curb to the side of the road.
A perfect person is here for you to address that.
That's my comments, so.
Vernon? Oh, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, what the council member said, because when I drive down 155th and by the time, not there, and I go north 155th, it's pretty noticeable 155th out to Downey Road. And then, you know, I think the city, I don't know if the city limit ends at Downey Road or not, but yeah, that could take some attention. And I thought a couple, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, one of the landowners had some concern about that, and I think I had a great conversation with the city administrator and the superintendent of Burlington, you know, taking care of some of that and how it was going to be managed, and you know that. So I don't know, still kind of managing that somewhat. Okay, yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. We actually just had a discussion about this. Yes. Yesterday. And I'm gonna have a talk with Pete Haven, special counsel here at the end of the meeting about a couple items. The area you're talking about, Leavenworth Road, that's County Road 36. Majority of all that is outside the city limits. Deputy Chief is correct. If the parcels are over 3 acres in the city limits, the property owner is required to mow down past the right of way, which is typically 15, 18 foot in majority of the area. The areas that we're mowing now, we mow with the batwing mower, and we have to perform some maintenance tasks that aren't exactly safe. We take care of part of 147th, Hollingsworth Road, and we have to get the grass because it blows on the road, and it's another story. But we are addressing your concerns with items that need to be addressed through discussions related to Leavenworth County and their maintenance on County Road 35, which is parallel east, parallel east and Leavenworth Road east. So we are working on that.
One of the things that I know the city has been working on is improving the appearance, you know, and the maneuverability of 155th Street. And I know that we're doing some tremendous work out there because that's one gateway into the city from State to 155th. But as you continue to move forward north, I think that other side needs to have some attention to where it is pleasing to the eye. I think that's what I'm hearing from the council member here, you know, and I'm saying the same thing, that those are two markers for coming into our community. We see that sign that says welcome to Basin, we see stuff that might not be pleasing to the eye. And I know the north end is being worked on for various reasons. And that, I'm sorry, the south end is being worked on for various reasons. And the north end in my opinion, needs to be equally pleasing as people are coming into our city.
Yeah, I guess maybe a question, I don't know for who of those 51 cases, is it just a handful of repeat offenders. I think the way this was originally raised to us was in a neighborhood that had frequent concerns in one particular property. And I did drive by after that meeting, and it had been freshly brush cut and did not look great still. So I can see that, and don't know how much, we have the ability to go back to those same properties and maybe not leave door hangers in those cases, and be more as aggressive as we can within the current statute, or if we.
And what I will say on that is when we were researching this, we found that by state statute, the landowner only needs to be notified by certified mail on the first notification. That after that there doesn't need to be any notification before it goes to effect.
Okay.
I know, as an example, sometimes it's not as. Sometimes she makes the job look easy, but sometimes it's not as easy as it was. And the point in case is there was recently some land that had never popped up before that was called in a complaint, and 3 days tracking down the homeowner from. It went from one person, it was sold from one person to another, who business down in Shawnee, who said they had nothing to do with them, to tracking them down to an address in Florida, to calling places there, to tracking it down to an address in Nebraska, and we finally did get hold of them. Nebraska taken care of, but not yet.
It's a work in progress.
So it's still a work in progress. So, but when a violation is found, ACO Web will normally hang the door hanger on there saying, hey, close to being in violation of this. And then she'll give it, she normally will give most people, just like you were talking about the 4th of July, she'll give it up to the weekend.
Yeah.
Because that's what most people take care of. And then she'll check back up on them after a few business days. And if it's still out of compliance, that's when we'll send a letter out to them, and she'll keep it checking on it.
I appreciate that. And, again, it puts you in a hard position, right? At trying to enforce some of this, but for those that have been habitual offenders, if we are, we use the tools that we have available to keep the community looking nice.
I believe there are some.
Yeah, and I just want to say, thank you, because I know it's a challenging and but it is good to keep our city looking nice and safety too when you're pulling out of a driveway or a side street. So thank you.
North Road, what you're talking about, like north of there, that's our main.
It is. Yeah.
We're working on it.
Yeah. So thank you. And thanks for bringing this to be discussed too.
You have any other questions for Captain or anything else?
I do not. Again, thank you both.
Thank you, Captain. Janie?
I have a question. You said they are notified.
Yeah, you can't ask questions during the meeting. You have something you want to address this actual thing now? I thought you. Right. You can talk to him after the meeting, but you need to address what you came for tonight on. Did you not come to address about this thing?
He gave all the information that I had a question about.
Okay, all right.
I have another question about what you said, but I'll just.
Go ahead and ask it if it's just one question.
Yes, you said something about there was, and maybe I misunderstood it, the people that own these lots. The gentleman that owns lots, maybe is only notified once.
At the present time, while we were doing the research, when we found out that the state statute only requires the very first time to be notified. So our ACO CSO officer, Officer Webb, will go out and she'll put the door hanger saying that he's getting close to being out of compliance. At that time, when she goes back and finds it's out of compliance, that's when a certified letter is mailed. I believe currently what the police department is doing, we mail certified every time. But so that is more, I guess you could call it more lenient than what the Kansas state statute requires, which is only the first time they have to be notified. From that point on, it goes to a
But not a first time for every time that it gets over 12 inches. It's just one time.
That's what the Kansas state statute says. Like I said, right now, until we did some research into this, we were sending out a certified letter every time that they get out of compliance.
Anybody else have any questions? Nope. Okay, thank you very much, Captain.
Thank you.
So moving on, item number 4, 2024 budget presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Cameron. If you could toggle over to the budget presentation tab. Thank you so much. Next slide. This is our budget timeline. This is our 6th presentation about the budget. They are all open to the public. The majority of them are also recorded on YouTube. We include this information on the city's website in the Basehor Quarterly Newsletter. We're also required to publish notice regarding public hearings as well. So we have 2 additional presentations regarding the budget beyond tonight. Next slide. Just a reminder of some tax terminology. Ad valorem tax is just property tax. The mill rate is the property tax rate. 1 mill generates about $130,000 of city tax levy, giving our assessed value. And then the tax levy is the revenue generated by applying the mill rate to the assessed value for the city. Next slide. The city has several different types of funds. We have our governmental activity funds that are primarily funded by property tax, our capital project and equipment funds that are primarily funded by sales tax. We have our enterprise funds that are funded by the utility charges. We have some fiduciary funds that the city holds the funds, but doesn't necessarily have any control over those funds. And then we have our special funds, and they have restrictions about the revenues and expenditures within those funds. Next slide. We have our 2024 budget priorities that we have used consistently with a few minor tweaks over the last 3 years. And everything that is included in the budget presentation and really the budget is in support of those established budget priorities for the city of Basehor. Next slide. For every $1 of property taxes paid by a resident of the city of Basehor, for every $1 of property taxes paid, 23 cents goes to the city of Basehor, 25 cents to Leavenworth County, 41 cents to the school district, 1 cent to the state, 5 cents to the community library, and then 5 cents to the Fairmount Township Fire District. Next slide. Again, a refresh of some of the data that we've been able to obtain. There are 503 cities of the 3rd class in the state of Kansas. The average mill rate for those 3rd class cities is 48.795 mills. So our 33.873 is significantly lower. When I rank them from highest mill rate to lowest mill rate, we are 339 out of 503. Next slide. When we look at the cities that are similar populations, regardless of class, this is what we find. There are 12 cities in the state of Kansas that have a population between 6,000 and 8,000. The mill rate, average mill rate of those cities is 44.022 mills. So when we rank that group from highest mill rate to lowest mill rate, we are number 10 out of 12, or second from the lowest. Next slide. We recently made this post about the grant dollars that we were able to get for City Park, and we did receive some feedback from the community asking why these dollars aren't used for property tax reduction. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that. If we could go to the next slide. So the city has been able to secure over $17 million in grants and external funding for projects in our community. Those grant dollars and external dollars are specific for the use for which we've applied. So it's not a situation where we apply for grant dollars for city park trails and then we can turn around and go build a shelter park at Tomahawk Park. We can't do that. We have to be able to use those dollars for the intention for which we've applied. And then those dollars are used for primarily large capital projects so that we're lessening the tax burden for large capital projects of the sales tax and property tax dollars of Basehor residents and businesses. Next slide. I did some just quick analysis just for some perspective. We did show that $17 million is about 5 times the amount of property taxes that we collect in a single year. This slide is just for informational purposes only. This is not intended to demonstrate the city's direction or policy decisions. This is just for informational purposes. So if we were to generate the same amount of money from grants and external dollars with property taxes, we would have to raise the mill rate by about 132 mills. If we were to generate the same amount from sales tax, we would have to increase the sales tax rate by more than 15.5%. And if we were to generate that same amount of dollars from fund balance, meaning saving up for those improvements over time, we would have to wait until 2037. So this slide is to demonstrate the absolute significance of us being able to obtain over $17 million in grant funding, and also to provide clarity to the community that those dollars aren't just sent to the general fund and can be used for city expenses. They're heavily regulated and can only be used for the intents and purposes for which we've applied. Next slide. A reminder about how taxes are calculated on a home. We start with our appraised value that's set by the Leavenworth County Appraiser's Office. We multiply that by the assessment percentage that's set in state statute. Then we get our assessed value. We then multiply that by the city's mill rate divided by 1,000 to get the city's portion of the tax bill. Next slide. So the average home in the city of Basehor is $375,000. When we do the math on that, the city portion of the tax bill would be $1,461. And again, highlighting in yellow, of all the factors in this equation, the city controls one factor, and that's highlighted in yellow, and that's the city's mill rate. Next slide. Just as a reminder about the assessment percentages that we talked about in the last slide, for residential properties, it's 11.5%. For commercial, it's 25%, so more than double the assessment percentage of residential properties. And for vacant lots, it's 12%. So of all the categories that are on the screen, the assessment percentage for residential properties is the lowest. Next slide. As a reminder, we evaluated the percentage of appraised value for some of our neighbors for commercial properties. The percentage of appraised value for commercial properties in the city of Basehor is a little over 3%. Lansing and Tonganoxie are about double where we are. And then the city of Leavenworth is about four times the amount, which again, yes, sir.
Sorry,
Please.
before the next slide, I was just going to ask how much does the new commercial activity that we already have going on relate to that 3.29% with some of what's already been approved and in the works? Do we know what that increase will look like?
We
Rough
don't.
estimate.
We don't. We can certainly take a look at that. It will probably be probably not be until 2025
Right.
that those come online. But we can certainly take a look at what activity we have going and what impact that could have to that percentage.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that'd be helpful.
Sure. That'd
Thank
be
you.
great. Yeah, you bet. Okay, next slide. Just as a reminder about our property valuation, the assessed value from 2023 to 2024 did increase by 17%. So the two scenarios that we've been discussing over the course of the budget cycle is a flat mill rate, and that would generate an estimated $644,000 of property taxes to the city, and the quarter mill reduction would be about $612,000. Now, keep in mind that about a third of that is due to the development activity in the city. So new homes being built. So a large majority of that is due to new development activity. Next slide. So if the property tax rate were to stay flat, but property values increase, what does that mean for the city of Basehor property owners? That means on average, a residential property is going to pay about $12 more per month in property taxes to the city. And a commercial property would pay about $83 more per month to the city. Next slide. If we take that same analysis and look at a quarter mill reduction, that would reduce that for residential properties to about $11 per month. And for commercial properties, it would be $79 per month. Next slide. Staff recommendations for the 2024 budget remain unchanged from the previous meeting, but I'll just review those very quickly. We recommend a flat mill rate in 2024 of 33.873 mils. And this is again to support the stated budget priorities of this governing body, and also keeping in mind we are experiencing a reduced activity as it relates to residential building permit activity. We all are also recommending that we take a formal position to support the funding of the local ad valorem tax reduction fund. We do have a webinar tomorrow that we'll be joining along with Commissioner Doug Smith just to learn more information to see what other communities would like to be involved in that. Just as a reminder for the community, these are dollars, a certain percentage of the sales tax that should be reallocated back to local cities and counties to reduce the mill rate, but the state of Kansas has exempted themselves out of that requirement for the last several years. For example, in 2022, that would have been a reduction of over 2 mils. So we would recommend that we take a formal position to support the funding of that fund. Again, the mill rate, as we said in previous discussions, is 100% a policy decision of this governing body. We serve at the pleasure of this governing body, and we certainly welcome the feedback. So on the following slide, we were asked from Councilmember Maples in the last presentation that if a quarter mil reduction were the decision in the direction of this governing body, what would that look like? And Leslie and I took a look at several different scenarios. We really want to support the priorities of this governing body, and we feel like this is probably the best case scenario. We didn't want to cut funding for the fireworks. We didn't want to recommend, cutting out the survey initiative. We think that all those initiatives fall in line with what the priorities are. So if the direction is to reduce the mill rate by a quarter mil, our recommendation would be to freeze the hiring of a parks maintenance worker temporarily, freeze hiring of a management analyst temporarily, until such point in 2024 that our revenue performance exceeds the forecast for 2024. And we feel confident that we would be able to fund those positions at that time. If the revenue performance does not exceed the forecast, those positions would remain vacant for the duration of 2024. We have been really hard at work trying to recruit for positions, and we have a lot of vacancies. Certainly, we tried to alleviate some of those concerns through the sales tax initiative by trying to make Basehor an attractive place for folks to work. Unfortunately, that did not go through. And so we continue to have difficulty recruiting for certain positions. So again, we did not want to put the governing body in a situation where we were, cutting the fireworks or cutting those sorts of things that we have heard are important to this governing body. And we think that this would be a viable option if that's the direction of this council. So I think on the last slide, I just have my timeline again, saying that I'll be back again for the budget. Sorry, everyone. On August 9th. So if we could go back to the previous slide, Cameron. I would just pause here for feedback. This is really the point in the budget cycle where the rubber meets the road. And so we would just really appreciate the feedback on this option that is up on the screen, and then also the staff's recommendation of a flat mill rate. I appreciate this governing body's patience with me as I go through the same presentation over and over and over again, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Anybody have any questions? Vernon?
That slide that shows 131 point. Can you go back to that slide?
Yep. Keep going. Keep going. There you go.
Right there. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I know over the last few years, and with the guidance of our city administrator, we've applied for a tremendous number of grants. We've been extremely fortunate to be able to receive those dollars. I know you've been heavily involved with it. The city administrator has been involved with it, as well as others. When I put applications in for funds, I looked at it from this perspective. Ways that we can keep from increasing any of the mill levy, because we get these funds that come in for specific activities that will, in the long run, I think I said this last time we had a meeting, sometimes people might not see all the benefit. But this right here points out some of that benefit. Every application that I submit to Mark, every application that the staff submits to Mark with my support or other people's support is geared at decreasing any of our potential mill levy. $17 million is a lot of money. And we've been extremely fortunate here in Basehor to receive that. We look at the fact that Leavenworth County had not received that kind of funding anyway. So I just want to just reiterate that every time the staff applies for a grant, be it that it is staff and council members or staff and whoever, those funds are used to help decrease our, some of our expenditures. But I really like that. I remember sitting at Mark going through the meetings and and doing the presentations, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is like a tax cut, this is like a tax cut, this is like a tax cut. You know, and it's just always in the back of my mind. And as I look at monies that's coming out of the National League of Cities, again, it's this kind of thing. And I know the mayor has been extremely supportive. The mayor knows that I tend to kind of focus on getting monies from outside the communities in. I know the staff also looks at doing that, you know, and we just need to continue to do that. So it's not often you guys hear me say thank you. Is that true? That is so true. But thank you all for helping us get those funds. And the community might not understand it now, but down the line, we will we'll see the benefit. We talked about beautification. You heard us talk about the north side of 155th and the south side of 155th boundaries. Those things all have an impact on bringing people into the cities. I know the city administrator heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. Miami-Dade County in Florida has a master park plan. And the master park plan is that everybody should be able to, within a 15-minute walk from their house, be able to reach some type of park. We are making progress in that direction. As we make progress in that direction, we're going to see more people wanting to come to Baker and live in Baker because it's a great place to live, work, and play. So I just want to say thank you to the staff that really helped with that, because that was always my bottom line.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I appreciate the additional information, right? I asked that question last time, and just thinking about the expenditures, because I get it. I would prefer my taxes to be lower and prefer the valuation was not jumping the way it is. So I appreciate the support and the county's efforts in that legislation of capping the increases of property tax valuations. But I've been racking my brain too of, okay, what things am I aware of that we could drop that cover that gap? That yes, every little bit helps, but $1 a month to not have the beautiful new parks maintained, $1 a month to not have additional grants submitted to redo the trails in existing parks, continue to build new parks. I can't quite get there.
Okay, you were reading my mind. Yeah, could we, yes, that's the slide I wanted to look at again. So this would be with the reduction. If we leave it flat, would you still be able to continue to recruit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I, when I look at, and submitting grant applications, I mean, that takes time, effort, and detail. Because grants require great detail or they just get skipped over. I know that from my career at KU Med Center. And also, we've got, these parks that we're building for the community, and if we don't maintain them, so I'm with you, Councilmember Maples. I think these are critical positions we need to try and get filled. And like you said, $1 a month just doesn't, I don't want to raise taxes and I am glad to hear that you're going to be on that with Commissioner Smith tomorrow. I'm very anxious to hear how that goes. I think it's very important at the state level. We definitely have to get the state representatives to listen and to try and get this law changed and help us. And then, with the county. So that's my comments, and don't feel like it's being repetitious, Maddie. I mean, this is very good information. I know it takes you time and we do appreciate it because it's a very important decision that we all have to sit up here and think about, because it's for the entire community and everybody that lives here. So we do appreciate it. I might have to hear it 6 more times, so it's okay. So thank you.
Twist every time. So.
Yeah, new twists every time.
Yeah. So, so thank you. And
thank you very much.
So that's what I have to say on it.
So Mayor, if you're comfortable with it and if it is the consensus of the council members that are here, we will start kind of narrowing the focus. We are at that critical stage in our process to start narrowing the focus. Right now, we'll show it as a flat mill moving forward. That doesn't mean that we can't continue to bring back the quarter mill reduction option, but we're 2 meetings away from voting on a budget to submit to Leavenworth County. And so with your permission, we will start narrowing the scope and start presenting a flat mill
Yeah,
rate.
I think the consensus of the three that's here is exactly that. So. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Great job, man. Moving on there, item number 5, area plan discussion.
Okay, well, Mayor, I'm going to kick this off and then I'm going to turn it over to Maddie and then we're going to turn it over to Mr. Jason Meyer, who is here with us in the audience. And then Pete Heaven is certainly available to answer questions as they may arise. First, I need to point out that I do have an error in my packet summary sheet. I said 252 acres. I think I got a little excited. It's 241.2 acres, but who's counting those 0.2 acres? Darn counting Maddie over here was like, when she was reconciling the data, she's like, where'd you come up with 252? And I'm like, because I made it in the middle of the night at home because we're writing grants. So anyways, with that said, we're here tonight to discuss and bring back for your consideration the area plan for the approximately 241.2 acres that the city of Basehor and Basehor Land Bank own, which is directly across the street from City Hall here, just to the east of 155th Street along Basehor Boulevard. As you know, an area plan is really the first step in establishing what the city council plans for its vision for future development. Just to be clear, outside of public spaces, the city council, as we understand it, does not have any desire to be in the residential or commercial development business. So ultimately, this area plan and whatever the council sets as your priorities will then establish the process that staff will need to use to come back to you to ultimately help you identify a developer or a series of developers that you could potentially work with to get this property developed as you see appropriate. And to assist in kind of the feedback component of the area plan discussion that the city council engaged in at your governing body retreat, we did engage land planning services with Jason Meyer just to kind of put some fine touches on the different thoughts and inputs that you had. Since this is an opportunity to visit with the public also about kind of the history of Basehor Town Center, we know that there are occasionally questions that come up on Facebook about why does the city own that land? What is the city's intent with that land? Is the city going to raise my mill rate because you own that land? We thought it might be worthwhile just to do a very quick summary of the presentation that the governing body received at your governing body retreat, which really answers some of those questions. So that way, as they arise, as you're working through this area plan, we can point residents and interested parties to look at that. So I'm going to turn it over to Maddie to kick things off and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Leslie. Cameron, if we could toggle over to that presentation and go to the next slide. Just as a map to orient ourselves, like Leslie said, it is the property just directly across the street and it extends all the way to 147th Street and sort of surrounds the Basehor Intermediate School there in the center. Next slide. Just a little bit of a brief history with some quick dates. In 2007, the original development plan for Basehor Town Center was approved. In 2008, there was an issuance of TIMP notes, and those TIMP notes were designed to fund public improvements for infrastructure. And then they were then subsequently extended. So usually TIMP notes are about a 2-year term. So they were extended in 2010. And then in 2012, the city decided to issue a general obligation debt for those improvements. Certainly, I don't want to play Monday morning quarterbacking, but if we could go back in time, we probably would have made a different recommendation. But general obligation debt was issued at that time nonetheless. So in the same year, special assessments were added to the tax rolls, and those special assessments were designed to cover the bond payment of those general obligation bond payments that were used to fund for the public improvements at the Basehor Town Center. In 2021, because certain special assessments went unpaid, the city entered into a settlement agreement and accrued 97 of those acres. Then in 2020 to 2022, we did a sewer master plan and a subsequent update where we looked at that piece of property and the importance that it has as it relates to the future infrastructure of our sewer development. Then we looked at our comprehensive plan through 2021 and 2022 and did a land plan that I have included in the presentation. In 23, we acquired the balance of the 144 acres, and then we performed asbestos abatement in the 3 structures across the street. So in the next subsequent slides, I'm going to talk about what the intent of the temp notes and the general obligations and special assessments were versus what has actually happened, which has led us to be in the position that we are today. Next slide. So when the special assessments and the debt was issued, the thought was we would receive about $215,000 in special assessments. The payment on the bond for the improvements was a little over 200,000. So the city, if all special assessments were paid on time, would have a positive net position as it relates to this particular funding structure. So the city would not have to subsidize these improvements. The balance of the bond payments would be paid by the special assessments paid by the property owners. But unfortunately, that did not happen. So if we go to the next slide, what has actually happened looks a little something like this. We've received about $78,000 per year on average from special assessments. That bond payment has not changed because it's general obligation debt. It means that the city is on the hook for those payments, no matter what happens with the special assessments. So the city has had to subsidize to the tune of $123,000 per year for this property because of the structure of the special assessments and the general obligation bond issuance. Go ahead, next slide. So just as these are real dollars and cents of what we've expended from 2013 to 2022. We've received about $783,000 in special assessments. We've paid in bond payments a little over $2 million. So from 2013 to 2022, the city's net position on this particular property is a negative 1.2 million, almost negative $1.3 million. Next slide. If we were to continue on this trajectory, if our governing body did not step in and, for lack of a better term, stop the bleeding, this is what would have happened. We would have estimated to receive about $1.5 million in special assessments. We would have paid a little over $4 million in bond payments. So from 2013 to 2032, the city would have subsidized to the tune of $2.5 million. Next slide. This encapsulates all the expenses that the city has expended on Basehor Town Center to date. The bond payments that we've made for this property is almost 1.3 million. The settlement of the 97 acres that I spoke about earlier was a little over 100,000. The acquisition of the remaining 144 acres was a little over $2.1 million. And then we've had to expend some dollars related to legal fees, some survey work, and environmental work. So the city has expended about $3.6 million to date on the Basehor Town Center property. Next slide. In 2018, because the intent of the bond and interest fund is to cover the bond payments, and there was a general obligation bond that was issued as a result of Basehor Town Center that the city had to subsidize. The city had to make a significant decision to increase the mill rate in 2018 to fix the structural imbalance that was caused by the non-payments of the special assessments for BTC. We do not forecast having to increase the mill rate in future years because of this. This has already been course corrected in 2018, but we just want the public to understand why that increase happened in 2018 and the history behind it. Next slide. Here are some previous planning documents, and Mr. Meyer is going to get up here in just a second and go over his area plan. But we have been planning for this property for a very long time. So I'll go through these very quickly. These were some of the preliminary development plans. You can see it's a mixture of single family residential, some density, some commercial, some public space. Next slide. Just a little zoomed in about some density, some public space, some single family residential, some commercial. Next slide. Again, you can see some, recreational areas, some single family residential, some density. Next slide. Then we had a master plan several years ago that looked at the entire property and thought, okay, well, maybe some baseball fields or maybe some apartments, maybe some residential twin villas. The next slide. Our current zoning is a mixture of mixed use and planned residential. Next slide. Our future land use calls for very similar uses, mixed use, low density residential, and some medium density residential. Next slide. We did look at this very intently in the sewer master plan and the subsequent update. Like I said earlier, this piece of property is critical for the expansion of our sewer infrastructure. And so we certainly took a look at this property during the course of those studies. Next slide. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in the comprehensive plan, we also did a land area plan that calls for very similar items that we discussed with the governing body at the governing body retreat. So what we've done is, as Leslie mentioned, we've taken the feedback that we received from the governing body retreat as it relates to this item. And at this point, I will turn it over to Jason Meyer to talk about the plan that's available in your packet. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. I don't know if you guys know a little bit about my background. I'm a landscape architect and land planner. I've designed a few hundred developments throughout the Midwest over the last 27 years. So I work primarily with real estate developers. So I design developments for them, typically for profit, when they do it right. And when Leslie gave me a call, I was really excited because you guys have an opportunity here now understanding the history of this property. There's a long history, but where this can go, I get to do the fun stuff. So this is really exciting for me to be able to help plan the future of the city, taking into account the experience that I've gained over the last 27 years of doing this throughout the Midwest. And so how do we create a new town center? How do we create all these things that create synergy to help bring people to Basehor, to help keep them in Basehor and give them multiple price points and products so that they want to stay here and invest in the city. So this plan is very conceptual. So I can talk about some of the land uses and integrating some of the ideas that you all had from your guys' retreat. We've kind of played with that and tried to create something that symbolizes what you guys did, but create something that's very buildable and marketable. And so when I say that, I don't mean I consider an investment for the city. And I don't mean just money. I mean the parkland, the city hall, all of the different things that we can do on this plan are an investment in the city. And so how do we get the most return for the city on it? So I think I'm going to kind of broadly talk about the land uses and how it's laid out. And then I want to hear feedback and kind of hear what everybody else has to say. And we kind of went back and forth, Pete, Leslie, and I, on some of these land uses. And really, I'm very excited. I don't have a pointer, but the commercial area that is shown in red over here next to City Hall, where we're at right now, the ability to create a new city hall or a town center, a community green where we can have the farmers, a farmer's market, food trucks, concerts at night. I mean, just creating that synergy in the community, not just a place, but trying to create something really special for the people that live here. And so I think we can really do that. And that represents the highest density portion of the property. So that's where we really are going to be compact with buildings, parking lots, really neat streetscapes and walkable spaces. And so with that, you want to have the ability to get people to live in those areas, to be able to get to that space so that there can be restaurants and bars and all the things that create the nightlife in the city. So that is why we have apartments, we have residential twin villas, we have what I'm calling residential T&D homes. So there's a small street that has a back alley with front porches that front onto the park space. And really what I'm trying to do is to kind of transition. So we're transitioning from the higher density into the less dense area, which is farther over on the east side. So we have much large acreage lots that are outside of the city limits. But how do we transition to that land use is what I'm trying to do. So, the apartments, I've kind of focused those on the northern side of Basehor Boulevard. I wanted to keep them close to the commercial because that's that synergy that works really well when people live in apartments, the young professionals and folks that empty nesters that don't want to have the maintenance of the yard. give them a really unique opportunity to be able to live in a space where they can walk to commercial, walk to shops, that kind of thing. So it's close. And you'd be surprised how many families or single parents live in apartments that need to be able to get their kids to school. So that synergy between the school works really well. So one of the other things that's pretty exciting is that you have the opportunity to have more park ground. And your Councilman, you were talking about being able to walk to those parking spaces. These are not designed or planned yet. These are just kind of conceptual. But ideally, we would have maybe a park that's close to the commercial centers that has a community center, a community pool, a Frisbee golf area, just kind of a very not intense, not ball fields, just an area that people can go relax, the walking trails that go around that helps tie the school and the commercial, all of that. It kind of creates a central green for the entire new development. One of the other things I'm trying to do is provide a trail that kind of links all the way around the development so that we can create that linear trail for the city and for this area. That's the number one requested thing in any development that I work on is trails. People want to be able to get out and walk and experience nature. And so having those trails, kind of what I'm trying to do is border them on the north side, basically all the way around the apartments. I have a trail system and green space. So that way we're kind of secluding it into an area, giving them all that pedestrian activity, but it also provides a nice landscape buffer. So, when you're driving along the parkway, I'm planning on having like a really nice landscape buffer along that. So you're not right next to the apartments. There actually is a trail and a parkway right along the road. So that trail kind of links all the way around to the northeastern corner where we have another park area. Again, not programmed, but whatever happens there is something that's going to be a study that the city does to figure out what you guys want to do for parks. And then kind of circling around, we have larger lots, single family residential, kind of around the eastern side of the school. Coming down, I'm providing kind of stub streets as they would kind of planning for future development, potentially all the way over onto the east side. And then further to the south, where we know we already have an applicant that's coming in with another residential subdivision. So tying into the access points that they already had to create that interconnectivity between what's down south and what's here. But I think having product uses or different product sizes and price points is really important. So we do have twin villas. Some people call them duplexes, but when you sell them, you call them twin villas. But it's the same thing. But then the idea of smaller single family homes, T&D homes, I did show a rear alley, but I would actually probably discourage that. There's a way to modify house plans where you set the garage back from the front porch. So you still have access to the front of the house, but then the backyard, you still have a backyard. If you have a back alley, you have a garage that's on the back side and you don't have a backyard. And us in the Midwest, we love to have our little swing set and our kids to be in their fenced in backyard. So it's a safe space for them. So there's ways to get that streetscape that looks really cool with the front porches and have neighbors get to know each other without the additional expense of infrastructure and the loss of a backyard. So there's just some really fun, I would say, hybrid homes that we could put in there that would give us those looks. I would say we focus those areas. We wouldn't want to just say do it everywhere on the plan. It typically adds an expense when you have the driveway a little bit longer and you set the garage door back. It adds expense to the builder's plans. A lot of builders don't really like that much. But anyways, so that's kind of a general overview. I am adding in detention basins where there are low points on the site. That's typically what we have to do in any new development. We have to ensure that no runoff that currently is on site happens after the development has been built. So that's kind of a general overview. I know we've talked a lot about different types of things that can happen in the commercial spaces, but we're not getting into the design yet. It's just really conceptual, just to kind of get feedback. So with that, I'd love to entertain any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Sure.
Who wants to go first? So where the multifamily apartments are you talking there would be a buffer there to the north a trail and like trees, or are there already trees in that location that could be salvaged to have a break between that and what I assume is single family homes to the north?
Yes, actually, so I'm showing about, it's about a 50 to 75 foot wide buffer. We have a lot of existing trees that are kind of in the backyards of the homes here. I'm just adding to that width, so that way, typically an apartment complex will have a building setback. This is now width, so that way, these neighbors won't really argue as much. I mean, we're kind of giving them a pretty substantial buffer and reducing the densities of the apartments to be able to do that. And I thought that was kind of a nice compromise to keep the density close to the dense commercial area, without taking out what I think would be a really good link part of the school here. So it's.
No, well, I have a few.
Yeah.
So the other thing is on the multifamily, would that be all considered rental, or would there be any, like, say, condominium owned, like 8 plexes or anything? Or what was the kind of the thought there?
So I would recommend that more of a study be done looking at the actual product. Most developers that I work with will do a market study. They'll do an analysis of what the neighborhood, or what the area really wants. And so I'm certainly not proposing, when I say apartments, yes, I think we can have 4 plexes, 6 plexes, 8 plexes, and a portion of that. But I do think that closer to the commercial, it probably does make sense to have 2-story, possibly even 3-story apartments with carports and areas for people to park back behind. I've worked on quite a few apartments that look really, really nice. The thing is, you got to keep the price down a little bit. We can't go too crazy with the price, because there have been examples of that. And then people can't afford to live there. So they go ahead and they buy a single family house, because it's about the same cost per month. So, but no, I definitely think we can mix in a lot of different products. Every apartment developer that I work with, they generally need about 30 acres to be able to put in a community center, to be able to pay for their own pool and community center to serve the residents of their apartment complex. So I think there's 10 acres or more that I think we probably use for the regular, smaller, dense, less dense 4 plexes, 6 plexes, 8 plexes.
Okay. As far as your community center and community pool, is the thought of that for the entire city of Basehor residents to have a community building and a public pool? Is that the thought there?
Absolutely.
Okay. For the residential townhomes and villas, are you thinking that those would be owned by the homeowner?
You know, typically that's how it is. Sometimes you'll have a developer that wants to come in and build twin villas and rent them. But it's almost 50-50. So it really, it can go either way. And to be honest with you, some of the best looking twin villa products that I've seen are a for rent product, because then it's all maintained by the same HOA, same company that maintains them. So they look really nice, and it's not individual people that are trying to mow and maintain their own yards. So it's just typically, a lot of times the rental ones actually look a little bit nicer. So.
For the park area that you've got allocated, is there already current tree coverage there that could be salvaged? Or is that open farmland, prairie? Okay.
It's really pretty open.
Okay.
I mean, this is actually an existing pond that's there that I would love to kind of salvage and kind of turn it into a really nice feature where we can have the community center, community pool with trails around that water feature. But up in the upper right, no, that's just kind of open.
Okay. And I assume that the larger lots would be like the estates.
Yes.
Okay. And one last question, what is the little red star? That's in
That's a
this?
sculpture of you in the center
Okay,
of.
awesome.
No, I honestly, I put that there because to me, that is the heart of the city. That is where you can have the farmer's market, food trucks parked every Tuesday night and Thursday night, or whatever it is, a car show. I mean, you can have so many different events around a community green like that. There's great examples throughout the country. I mean, that to me is, I call it a high design place. You can have an outdoor amphitheater and create that synergy. And on that, you'll have the restaurants and the bars. And so it's not just daytime, it's nighttime. That to me, it becomes the heartbeat of the city. If we design it right, it can be really special.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hayden?
Yes, I think probably a little bit in line with one of those questions is either the Twin Villas or the T and D homes that are next to the senior living facility. We talked about some kind of transitional housing options that could be in that area. Does the T and D fit that mold potentially?
Yeah, when I say T and D, that throws people off sometimes. It means traditional neighborhood development. I really think the better term would be smaller single family homes, because I think then you can you don't get locked into a certain idea of what that, because sometimes a T and D house gets really expensive because you have the front porches, you have a lot of things.
Right.
But no, I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity to transition into that with maybe a less expensive product that could be used for that for sure. I think it's a pretty good location for it, right up next to the senior living facility. I mean, it's kind of a harsh parking lot all the way around it. So backing up to that is probably best to have your less expensive homes right there. So it's a good point.
Thank you. And then one of the things I noticed as we flipped through is it completely in alignment with the future land use map that we had identified? And I think you addressed the biggest reason why. I think one gap was that had showed some additional higher density housing kind of in the middle of that single family residential. And from a development standpoint, we try not to mix that, is what it sounded like.
Yes, so typically we don't want to mix the single family with the multifamily. It's just, it's not segregation. It's just that those are two different users at different stages of their life. And so, you'll have the young teen or not teens, the single parents or the young professionals that are living in those rental apartments or multifamily units. And then you'll have the younger families that are starting out in their homes and every aspect of it in the single family. So they typically don't build them right next to each other.
And then probably more process side for staff or, sorry, Pete, you're sitting at the table, you get one eventually, right? The rezoning process and it doesn't have to align with future land use map, right? But as we talk through that with rezoning, what is our own property? That's a pretty smooth process overall.
Yeah, and I've always looked at a land use plan or comp plan as a guiding.
Yeah.
Plan. It's just, it's designed to be tweaked and massaged once you get into the fine details of it.
Any chance we can go back to that? Just making sure that we captured those kinds of properties that were originally identified that I think, yeah, from overall, we have single family and some more medium density that's pretty well captured.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we added more green, more parkland, which I think is something the city, every city wants to have more of.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. And then I guess I did have one other with the parks, and again, how this all works and where we transition ownership. I assume the city then would maintain those sections, or is that something we would ask the developer to maintain, whether it's at least the trails or some of that parkland as well?
So I'll take a stab at answering that. I think the short answer is we'll want to look very closely at what our development agreement says about construction and then long-term maintenance. And then, as we're concluding this conversation this evening, or as this conversation's kind of coming to a close, I think we'd like to carve out a few minutes with Mr. Heaven to kind of talk about process and what it would look like to formalize the area plan with the council, because that really sets that next step. If you want to potentially look at some financing options or incentive options to be able to help fund some of these improvements that you're seeing.
I would also add to that, everything I've learned in real estate is that everything's negotiable. And so the trail system that I'm showing around the apartment complex or multifamily area, the developer maybe could pay for all of that. And so that, I mean, I wouldn't ask him to pay for the trail around the entire site, but around that portion, maybe he's responsible for it. So I mean, I think there's some ways to help the city not have to pay for all of those trails. They want the trails too. So I mean, it's a great amendment.
Yeah, in short, in our perfect world, they construct, we maintain, but everything is negotiable.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Vernon. Well, 23 years ago when I got here, we had a park. 11 acres for the city that was donated to the city. We had other land that's kind of park land that's been donated to the city.
And then since our city administrator has been here, we've been intentionally looking at building parks into areas where we're expecting to have people come. That to me is the biggest draw. All the other stuff, that would happen, but you heard me kind of tip my hand a little bit about having a park within a 15-minute walk of everybody, So when I look at that right there, I'm not so concerned about the apartments or yes, I said, I'm not so much concerned about the apartments. Need to make sure I'm on record with that. I'm not concerned about the villas, not concerned about any other stuff. What I'm concerned about is how do we get people into the city of Basel that want to live into the city of Basel, that want to stay in the city of Basel, that have opportunities for recreation here in the city of Basel. That's dynamic as far as I'm concerned. I think back to Paola. When I look at Paola, the square, when I go down to Savannah and I look at where Forrest Gump was at, I go up to Savannah, Missouri here. Those are all places that have parks that have squares or things that really draw people into the city. I like that concept. And then I like the statue also. Because it's going to draw people there, but we need to make sure we have amenities for people to be able to get to. I think about, as I continue to age, it was impossible for me to get up to that 11-acre park that we had. Granted, it was donated land, and then we got another 11 acres, which doubled our park land overnight. But now we're being intentional about it. And I think that the more intentional that we are about it, the more we'll get people to come to areas like the town square, or to come to areas like the park and stay here in Basel. Stay in Basel, live in Basel, spend money in Basel.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I've been, we were talking about it. And when you look at the metro and you try to find the hot spots for where younger people are moving to, they're not moving to the suburbs. They're moving to the hotbeds of activity. They're looking for that town center. They're looking for, so like Lenexa City Center, there's a lot of people, a lot of apartments, and they're young professionals that can afford to live there. That's where they're moving to because of that synergy, because of the parks and all that's right around it. So I think that's also critically important. One thing I might also add, I'm designing so many of these developments throughout the Midwest, around the metro, and transportation is changing. And now I'm designing amenity centers, and we are specifically putting in golf cart parking spots because everyone's driving their golf cart. They're all electric, so they're saving on gas, and the kids can drive them on the sidewalks. They drive them on the roads a lot of times. They don't know the rules, so that's a problem. And kids are on their electric scooters and they're flying, and so I think how creating the trails and giving them a way to get there versus going through parking lots and going through intersections they just don't understand. I think we need to do that for the safety of kids, because it used to be you'd walk and you'd run or you'd ride your bike, and now they just twist their throttle and they just go. So it's changing, and I think we got to design for that as well. So. Anything else, anybody?
I just think that it's important that we not have a park as an afterthought, but have a park on the front end of the conversation.
I think the mayor and I would probably like to carve out a small place for the Texas Roadhouse.
That would make sense.
Texas Roadhouse.
You'll hear me say it as often as I can.
So as we transition over to Pete, I would just make a note related to what you see on here for the community center and into the community pool.
Mhm.
Again, we understand that this is the first step in saying this has been a stated priority of the public. We hear a lot of feedback. the two things I hear are B and G, you know, where's the, you know, where's our grocery store here in Baser? And then where are you gonna put our pool? We want our pool. And, we look at this as an opportunity, especially with the multifamily, and particularly because the city owns this property. As we're exploring this development, maybe this is an opportunity where the apartments aren't building a separate swimming pool that is just designated for the apartment complex. Perhaps we're looking at some sort of collaboration, so that we can share expenses and find ways to get people using this pool. And so there's a lot of work still to be done, but we're really trying to figure out what is the most creative way to bring in the amenities that people say that they want, while doing it at a price that we can afford. And sometimes those things don't always intersect in the best way. So, if you don't have any additional questions or input or thought on the uses, this would probably be a good opportunity to transition to Pete to talk about what the next steps would be for formalizing area plan process, and then what that means in terms of structure and kind of all the steps that go after that.
Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And Jason is among the best. He really is. I've worked with him many, many years. We can look at this and say, what a great dream. And all these people are going to want to live there, but somebody's got to build something there first.
Right.
And to encourage development, we use TIF. We talked about that at the retreat. And to sort of reiterate what we discussed, TIF is an ability to use existing tax increment or taxes, real estate taxes, to be put back into infrastructure. So just an example, this entire area has a basis, a tax basis right now of, let's say, $100,000. And taxes are paid on $100,000. Let's say that's $1,000. Once we build houses, once we improve the area, of course, the value goes way up. So suddenly it's worth $1 million. And so there's tax on 900,000 that comes back to the city to pay for infrastructure. The best example I can give is one I used on Monday night in a totally different city, but we created a TIF district in a residential area that will generate $50 million in TIF revenue. The city doesn't know what to do with it. There's that much money involved. This would be a little bit smaller scale, but we can use TIF for the sewers. We can use TIF for streets. We can use TIF for all of these infrastructure improvements that attract the development community to the city because it's less expensive for them to build. It's very simple. They want to make a profit, and the more profit they can make, happy they are to build more. So my recommendation is we look at creating a TIF district of this entire area. And we do it earlier than later because the value keeps going up. So we want to do it while the value is very low. To do that, we've actually taken the first step, and that is we need to have a concept plan. And that's what this is, in effect. And that would be considered our TIF district plan. And we need to have a public hearing and decide whether we want to create the TIF district. It doesn't cost the city a penny to create a TIF district. Won't cost the taxpayers anything to create a TIF district. But once we do that, then we start carving up the area into different pods and attract developers to come in and do multifamily, fourplexes, single family, all of these different uses. And to encourage them, we can say, your property will generate this much increment, the so-called free money. We will share that with you. We'll give you 10% of it to do infrastructure for your streets. We keep 90% because we want to improve our parks, and we can use that money to improve our parks. So it works out to be a win-win. We share that increment with the developer. We keep most of it ourselves, and we build the dream we want. So that's kind of my recommendation. I think it's a very safe way to go. And I think you'll attract some very good developers.
What do those percentages normally look like? You throw out 10% is that typically enough of an incentive or enough to build a lot of the infrastructure that they really need?
The example I gave on Monday night, the developer is receiving $4 million of the 50 million. And the city is getting the 50 million or 46 million. I would say typically it's a split about 50-50, but it all depends on the revenue being generated.
The logistics. What impact does the school district have on tips?
Both the school district and the county can veto a TIF district. And the first step we would have would be to pass a resolution calling a public hearing for no less than 30 days nor more than 70 days from the date of passage. And at that public hearing, the school district and the county are invited to come and share their views. And I don't know of any, well, I think there's been one school district veto in the state of Kansas that I'm aware of, and that was Gardner Edgerton. And that was many, many years ago. And since then, there's been many TIFs. I know of no county that's ever vetoed a TIF. And frankly, I've spoken with Leavenworth County and they are encouraging it as opposed to being opposed to it.
For the dollars you mentioned that could be utilized for infrastructure, do those dollars have to remain within the area or can they be utilized anywhere throughout the city?
No, they have to be used in the district or immediately adjacent to the district.
Okay. Okay.
But we'll have plenty of things to spend money on here.
Yeah.
Yes.
As I told Leslie the other day, money's fungible, meaning, it may look one way here, one way there. If we're saving more money with TIF in this area, we have more general fund for the rest of the city.
To expend others. Okay.
Yeah.
So tip is one option.
Second option is a benefit district.
Okay.
A benefit district, well, that's basically what you have now. And that is you issue bonds and then you assess the bond payments back against the property. Now that increases the cost to the home, the benefit district assessment. Contrast TIF, they don't pay any more in real estate taxes. It's just the taxes go in different directions. So we could use benefit districts. I don't recommend it just because of the expense on the backs of the property owners.
I just think it's important to
Yeah.
talk about.
And I'm glad you raised that. Yes. And we could do it at large. I mean, we could just use general fund to do it, but I don't think we have the appetite to do that.
But look at the history of that Maddie gave tonight, and thank you for that, Maddie. I think this thing has been kind of self-contained already for years, and if TIFs can help it benefit, everybody, then I would definitely be in support of that.
I think it's a wise way to go and it will attract the development community, which is really what we need.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I think that's part of what we talked about at the retreat is there was pretty general agreement that if we're going to do this, we would like to have it move along, right? To build some of these amenities, to have those available to the community, to increase the commercial, to have multifamily that we keep getting requests for and can't find a good spot. This seems like a good spot, especially with the buffer. I think that's a great idea. And so I think the TIF allows that to move forward.
It does.
Likely quicker than a lot of other options.
And one of the things we can do with TIF is what they call special obligation bonds, which are city issued bonds, but payable only from a specific source, which would be TIF. When we do our projections and we figure out what TIF will be generated or what we hope will be, you can actually market bonds based upon that projection, even though nothing's been built. So that could provide some seed money up front to get sewers in and get a few things going.
Is a TIF a permanent district or is there a time frame on it?
20 years. Good question. But again, and the beauty and the reason most cities are in favor of it is it doesn't raise taxes on the property owner. You're paying exactly the same amount of tax you would whether there was a TIF district or not.
And I'm just thinking that that's a good number, help build the infrastructure and maintain it initially. And then those same dollars go further for maintenance when you're not doing any of the new construction components. But then those tax dollars then flow back through the normal
Right, at the end of 20 years.
proportions,
But what we're finding, and it's interesting because I never thought I'd see the end of a TIF district when I started doing these years ago. Well, guess what? We have now gone 20 years. And so a lot of cities are going in and reestablishing the TIF district now to renovate what was built 20 years ago. So you can continue every 20 years creating the district.
What would you need from the council for the next step?
I have a resolution calling a public hearing on a future agenda.
Okay.
And that'll be about 30 to 40 days out. And then have our hearing and you can decide whether or not to create a TIF district.
We could potentially have a resolution to set the public hearing date at your next regular city council meeting, which would be August the 9th. Should the city council desire to do that again, the only thing that is doing is notifying the public that you would be holding a public hearing for considering the establishment of that district, as we pointed out. At that point, we would also be inviting Leavenworth County and School District. I have shared the area plan with the school superintendent, and we've had a couple of very high-level conversations about the potential for development in this area. Again, he's the school superintendent, so if you like talking to the city administrator, but all of the school districts and growth and enrollment analysis contemplates the continued development in the city, and that does include apartments.
So that the 9th would potentially allow for a September 13th would be our first September meeting, public hearing. I don't know if there's interest. You said, I think 30 to 70 days. Is there
between 30 and 70
preference to be on the short end or long end, or
No, it really makes no difference.
Okay. So to me, keep it moving.
I keep it moving.
I would notice we're looking at where the TIF district boundary would be. We have, and you may recall, the gentleman who owns the 92 acres directly to the south of where Mr. Meyer shows kind of the lowest retention pond. Yes, so where Cameron has the arrow. The gentleman who owns that property, Mr. Andy Super, does have a general layout of single family development. It does look very nice. His issue is, as this governing body knows, there is no sewer availability there. Sewer availability to that property comes only through sewer being installed on our property. And so if the governing body has the appetite for it, I would, and I think Pete would strongly recommend that we consider including that 92 acre parcel in the establishment of the TIF district. It would help accelerate his ability to get that property developed as well. And at that point, if you recall from the sewer master plan, I mean, you've now opened up 300 acres of development in Bayside with one fell swoop.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm certainly open to that.
And the property owner has said he would be interested in being at TIF district.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for looking at that ahead of time.
Does the council have appetite to move it forward to the next step?
So this should be done by November.
Conceivably, yes. There's another 2 or 3 steps after we create the district, but it takes about 60 days to complete those steps after the district's created.
What was my concern? My concern is that there's gonna be election in November. We don't want the process to get started and then, people will be replaced on the council and then the process stops.
Yes, and the key is to set up the district.
Okay.
And then as a developer comes in, we create, he or she puts together a plan, and then we build a TIF project plan around that.
Okay.
That's going to come down the road a little bit. But the key is to get the district created, get word out to the development community. District is here, bring your plan.
So by November, we can get that done.
Hopefully.
Okay. I mean, really, because, there's a lot of work
mechanism to
that's going
exist.
Yeah.
I have your consensus.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think consensus moving forward.
Yes.
Thank you. I know that was a lot, but.
It's okay. It is important.
No, it's a great
It's be
project.
fun.
Okay,
Lots to do.
motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Got a motion, got a second,
Second,
all in favor, say aye.
I.
Hey, Pete.
Yes, sir.